We have 5 deadly stories of people who ignored the signs. I mean, bro, if you ignored the sign, like if you saw the sign and you just ignored it, you can't sue nobody. You can't get on nobody's ass. You can't just take accountability of your fucking actions, my nigga. You just said fuck it, you hard headed type shit. So that's my take on this fucking video. That's what I gotta say. Let's get into this bitch though.
Standing at the edge of a cliff, nearly 100 meters above the ground, a German tourist was just one step away from the perfect photo, and one misstep away from something irreversible. And the most disturbing part is that everything horrible that followed could have been so easily avoided. If only he hadn't ignored every sign, every barrier, and every warning just minutes earlier. The same mistakes made by 4 other victims in today's episode. If you missed the first part of this series, it should be on your screen now. But before we begin, as always, viewer discretion is advised. Machu Picchu is a place that seems almost otherworldly. High in the Peruvian Andes, the ancient Incan city rises out of clouds and jungle, drawing over 1.5 million visitors a year with its mystical stone structures, panoramic views, and treacherous paths winding above steep cliffs. For many, it's a trip of a lifetime, a spiritual journey, a photographic dream, or simply a bucket list goal. And 51-year-old German tourist Oliver Park was no exception. On June 29, 2016, he had joined a guided group visiting the UNESCO site, moving slowly with other hikers through the ruins, located 2,430 meters above sea level. According to park officials, that morning Oliver had already taken several photos, but none of them captured the perfect shot he had in mind. And so, as the group approached one of the upper terraces above the summit, a cliffside platform lined with rope and warning signs reading, "Do not pass," Oliver quietly slipped away. Ignoring the posted alerts, he climbed over the barrier and stepped into a restricted area that offered a breathtaking, yet clearly hazardous view. A few tourists shouted for him to stop, and even a park ranger called out warnings. But Oliver only smiled, waved it off, and handed his phone to a fellow traveler, asking them to take a photo. This time, the man wanted something dramatic, a mid-air shot that would make it look like he was flying above the Andes. In Oliver's mind, it was the ideal pose. But the moment he jumped, he wished he hadn't. Because at the top of his leap, Oliver suddenly lost his balance, staggering backward mid-air as he tried to recover. His arms flailed for just a second, and then, before anyone could react, he slipped and fell more than 100 meters down the sheer cliff face, vanishing into the forested ravine below. Panicked tourists immediately called for help, but it took nearly an hour and a half for emergency teams to reach the site. And by the time they did, there was another challenge: locating Oliver in the dense, uneven terrain. Unfortunately, when they finally found him, it was too late. Oliver had already died on impact, suffering massive blunt force trauma from the fall. Tragically, Oliver's death at Machu Picchu was not the first fatal accident at the site. In 2011, a South Korean tourist slipped and fell to her death while descending Huayna Picchu, the towering peak behind the main ruins. Just 2 years later, in August 2013, an American tourist in his 60s plunged over 300 meters from the same mountain. Witnesses said he had lost his balance while navigating a narrow, steep section with no handrails. Yet Oliver's one impulsive decision led to the first known fatality caused by deliberately bypassing marked barriers, all in pursuit of the perfect shot. Meanwhile, the next case isn't about a thrill-seeking tourist, but about someone who lived near danger every day and still let his guard down at the worst possible moment. On the morning of March 23, 2009, 31-year-old Muhammad Anwar set out for a short visit to a secluded orchard on Komodo Island. Anwar was a local fisherman who had grown up alongside the rugged landscapes of Komodo National Park, a sprawling Indonesian archipelago known for its dramatic terrain and drawing over 292,000 tourists every year. But the section of the island Anwar intended to enter that day wasn't meant to be visited. The orchard stood beyond a marked boundary, one of several zones the park had declared off-limits due to safety concerns. Locals were advised not to gather fruit or fish there, and especially not to enter alone. Still, Anwar climbed the narrow trail in the humid morning heat and made his way right into the trees. At some point, he began climbing one of the sugar apple trees. reaching up for fruit.
Are you a
But as
monkey?
he shifted his footing, he suddenly slipped, scraping against the branches. Anwar fell onto the rocky, uneven ground beneath the tree. Blood trickled from his arms and legs. And though clearly in pain, he managed to stand up slowly. For a moment, it must have seemed like the worst was already over. But at that point, Anwar still didn't realize that he wasn't alone on the ground. The thing is that Komodo Island is home to one of the deadliest populations of Komodo dragons in the world. As of 2009, the global population was estimated at around 3,500 individuals, with
Hey,
approximately
Chet.
2,900
Let me know when it's
of
2
them
o'clock.
concentrated within Komodo National Park itself. These
Just type in the
prehistoric
chat,
predators
2 p.m.
can grow up to 3 meters in length and are capable of detecting the scent of blood from several kilometers away. And now, Anwar stood completely alone and bleeding, attracting the attention of 2 such predators, who immediately began moving toward him. What followed next happened almost instantly. Both dragons lunged with terrifying speed, with their jaws snapping around his legs and arms. Anwar screamed, kicking wildly as the lizards dragged him through the grass.
Oh my
One clamped
God.
down on his torso, while the other
Ugh.
bit into his neck, with their
Oh.
serrated teeth slicing deep into muscle and artery. Hearing
Oh,
Anwar's
shit.
screams, nearby locals rushed toward the sound, throwing rocks and shouting to drive the dragons back. Eventually, they succeeded, but by the time the reptiles retreated, Anwar had sustained catastrophic injuries across his limbs and chest. He was rushed by boat to a small clinic on Flores Island, still alive when he arrived, but his condition was far beyond what
He's
the
still
rural
alive
facility
from
could
that
handle.
shit?
And just minutes after reaching the hospital, Muhammad Anwar was pronounced dead from
Damn.
massive blood loss. The horrific attack made headlines around the world,
Damn.
as it marked the first adult fatality from a Komodo dragon on the island in more than 3 decades. Meanwhile, in the next case, danger came from an ordinary amusement park, yet it struck someone who ignored the warning signs just the same. It was just after 5 p.m. on August 13th, 2015, when James A. Young, a 45-year-old special education teacher from East Canton, Ohio, was having fun at Cedar Point, the legendary thrill park perched along Lake Erie, often dubbed the roller coaster capital of the world. That afternoon, James was there with friends, soaking up the final days of summer. He just experienced the Raptor, a 92-kilometer-an-hour inverted steel behemoth known for its loops, twists, and the rush of its
My
feet
fuck
dangling
no.
flight.
I cannot get on that roller coaster, bro. I ain't gonna lie. Fuck, I gotta break that fear, fool. I gotta break that fear, fool. I do. I'm a grown ass man scared of roller coasters, bro. Hell nah, nigga. Hell nah. But this shit looks so fucking scary though. Like, especially these roller coasters right here, like when the fucking rail is at the top and like your body just like you not sitting like you not like really like sitting on like a cart or some shit and the rail is under you type shit. These type of roller coasters, I don't know what the fuck to say about that shit. I go win me a motherfucking basketball before I get on this shit, nigga. It's Six Flags, nigga. Fuck that shit, nigga. I'm dead ass, nigga.
But as he stepped away from the ride's exit platform, he realized that his phone and wallet were missing. James quickly figured out that he had dropped them during the ride, and now, somewhere beneath the maze of looping tracks, they lay scattered across the gravel. Incidents like this weren't uncommon, not just
And
at Cedar
that shit
Point.
right there, this shit right here, and that little drop shit, I gotta break that free, bro. But I ain't gonna lie, it's gonna take me some time. Not 1 month, probably 10 years until I do that shit, nigga.
But at other parks as well. And in such cases, staff always advised guests
And that
to wait until
slingshot
the ride
shit?
had
Fuck
closed
no.
So trained personnel could safely retrieve the lost items. But James didn't
I
wanna
get on
wait,
me a little
so he
kiddie
slipped
ride.
past the restricted area sign, climbed over a low fence, and entered the off-limits zone directly beneath the Raptor's return track to search for his belongings. Within seconds, the sound of steel echoed across the park once again. Another fully loaded Raptor train was speeding toward the station. And what happened
Damn.
next was truly horrifying. Traveling at a full speed of 92 kilometers per hour, the coaster struck him head-on. A young woman named Megan Moore, who was aboard the ride at the exact moment, later told reporters, "I was in shock because I didn't know what to do. It was terrifying." The train came to a sudden halt mid-ride, and Megan, along with other stunned passengers, looked down to see emergency crews flooding the perimeter, rushing toward the restricted zone. But by the time they reached James, it was, unfortunately,
He's
far
fucking
too late.
dead.
He had been killed instantly on impact. The coaster was shut down, and Sandusky police launched an investigation. Inspectors from the Ohio Department of Agriculture confirmed that there had been no mechanical failures. The Raptor had functioned exactly as it should, and it was the decision to enter the restricted area that had led to the tragedy. Yet James's aunt, Deborah Moore, later said his reckless choice was completely out of character, mentioning that he wasn't someone who would normally do something like this. But sadly, just one moment of trespassing was enough to cost the young man his life. And in the very next case, another barrier was
crazy.
crossed. Only this time, it wasn't a roller coaster waiting on the other side, but a deadly pull from the depths that no one could see coming. On March 9th, 1997, 41-year-old Emily Schwalen was spending her Sunday evening near the waters of Lake Berryessa, a massive reservoir perched above Monticello Dam in Napa County, California. A PhD candidate at
jacket
UC
or some
Davis.
shit.
She was intelligent, driven, and deeply independent. So at around 6:30 p.m., Emily made her way down toward the lake and eventually stepped into the water for a solitary swim. Witnesses later recalled how she moved calmly at first, pushing slowly past the shoreline and the floating buoy line that marked off the dam's restricted zone. From a distance, nothing looked alarming until she began drifting farther across the glassy surface with powerful force. In an instant, Emily began to struggle, with her strokes no longer carrying her forward. The current had taken hold beneath her, the unseen force generated by the massive overflow drain, ominously nicknamed the Glory Hole. Designed to funnel away excess water when the lake rose too high, the structure was a colossal concrete shaft, 22 meters across at the top, plunging more than 60 meters straight down into darkness. And on that March evening, the spillway was wide open, and it was pulling Emily in. Onlookers shouted for her to turn back, to escape the current, but she was already caught. In a desperate effort, Emily managed to grab onto the slippery rim of the spillway itself, clinging for her life as torrents of water surged past. For nearly 20 agonizing minutes, she held on, with her body pressed against the roaring force, while people on shore screamed for help, powerless to intervene. Then, exhausted, she suddenly lost her grip. In an instant, she was pulled into the vortex, sucked down the vertical shaft, and hurled through the concrete tunnel before being expelled into Putah Creek far below the dam. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately and began a large-scale search, only to recover Emily's lifeless body downstream later that night. Emily Schwalen's death marked the first and still only recorded fatality involving the Monticello Dam spillway. And while the site has long been marked with warning signs and perimeter buoys, her tragic accident prompted further safety upgrades in the years that followed, including improved signage, reinforced fencing, and an expanded exclusion zone around the rim. But in today's final case, while ignoring numerous barriers, a man willingly stepped straight into a predator's domain under the cover of night, with no one around to stop him. On the morning of July 6, 1999, employees at SeaWorld Orlando were performing routine checks near the orca exhibit when they made a truly chilling discovery. Floating lifeless in the water was the naked body of a young man, sprawled across the back of Tilikum, the park's largest killer whale. At first, staff had no idea who he was or how he had gotten there. But by midday, the mystery unraveled into one of the most disturbing and bizarre fatalities ever recorded at a marine theme park. His name was Daniel Dukes, a 27-year-old drifter and spiritual seeker originally from Indiana. For years, he traveled solo across the country, drifting from state to state and staying in communal spiritual centers or crashing on beaches. Dukes wasn't homeless, but his lifestyle was deeply transient. And when he arrived in Orlando, none of his friends or family could have imagined the decision he was about to make. On July 5th, just one day before the accident, Dukes entered SeaWorld as a regular guest. Surveillance footage later showed him wandering the park alone, taking particular interest in the orca enclosure, especially Tilikum, the largest orca in captivity at the time. But unlike the other visitors, Dukes didn't leave when the park closed. Instead, as the crowds exited and staff performed nightly cleanups, he slipped away and hid somewhere inside the complex. How he managed to evade security for so long still puzzles investigators. But at some point during the night, Dukes approached the tank and climbed over a series of clearly marked barriers reading, "Do not enter." Bypassing every warning, he eventually slipped off his clothes and entered the cold water of the orca tank completely alone.
Dumb shit.
A 5,400 kilogram bull orca had a long and controversial history. Captured off the coast of Iceland in 1983, he had spent decades performing in captivity. However, Tilikum was also associated with multiple incidents, including one previous death. Therefore, trainers knew him to be unpredictable, dangerous, and extremely aggressive. But Daniel Dukes didn't know that, or maybe he didn't care. And that mistake cost him his life, because the very moment he entered the water, Tilikum attacked. The orca slammed into him repeatedly, gripping Dukes' limbs in his jaws and dragging him across the pool with violent bursts of speed. Again and again, Tilikum thrashed the man's body, holding it under, then letting it go, only to strike again. Ultimately, Dukes' body was left with contusions, abrasions, and deep puncture wounds, signs of a prolonged and brutal encounter before he drowned. Following the incident, SeaWorld immediately shut down the exhibit and launched an internal investigation. Meanwhile, Dukes' parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit, alleging that the park had failed to warn the public about Tilikum's violent past, but the case was later dropped, and Daniel Dukes was officially labeled as a trespasser who had violated multiple layers of security, leading to a death that was as horrifying as it was avoidable. Unfortunately, each of today's stories ended the same way. Not by chance, but by choice. The choice to ignore a barrier, to step past a warning, and to believe, just for a second, that nothing bad could happen. And in the end, that second was all it took to lead to something irreversible. Now let me ask you, which of these stories struck you the most? And do you know of any similar cases
that motherfucking
series? Let me know in the comments.
The shit that struck me the most was that roller coaster when that motherfucking head knocked off his body. Like, damn. But like, that was his fault for sure, bro.